Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and today I want to talk about the upcoming landscape difficulty feature for the Lord of the Rings Online. The first half of the video will cover the news on this with update 30 and a new legendary server. Then the second half I will be sharing some of my thoughts on all this stuff in general. So yes, the teased landscape difficulty slider is currently in the update 30 beta, but it has not actually been formally announced that it is coming with the update. However, you all might remember that a legendary server was teased a couple years back, and it sounds like the LOTRO team finally has plans to launch that, where this feature will actually come out and it will be unique to this new server before it comes to the rest of the servers in the game. So essentially it sounds like the plans are for the landscape difficulty feature to be exclusive to an upcoming legendary server this year, and I don't know if this will actually align with update 30 or maybe be later in the summer as we get closer to Gundabad, or what it will be. But according to some developers and LOTRO's new producer, that does sound like it will be the rollout plan. Anyway, all of this I think is very exciting because as many people know, LOTRO in general is kind of easy on the landscape, so people don't really have to struggle too much to experience the story and adventure through Middle-earth, which of course can be a great thing. But with slowly accumulating changes over time, this has led to a lot of easiness that has left some players like myself who sometimes want a little bit more of a challenge actually feeling like the game is too easy though. So with a setting like this to change the difficulty, it can allow players to choose how hard they want their questing experience to be if you do want more difficult content. I do want to point out the background gameplay is me testing out some of the difficulty settings, so you may see me struggle a bit more than usual as I experience how hard it actually gets with the current implementation in the update 30 beta again. So I did a lot of this on the level 7 difficulty, which speaking of that, there are 10 difficulty options starting with like normal, then there's difficulty 1 through 9, tier 1 through 9 with the new settings, but we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, to cover what the setting does and its functionality, you first talk to an NPC to change the setting. The one I found was at Kellendam near the Stable Master, so it's reasonable to think there will be one in each of the starting areas in maybe Bree, but we will see when this feature is fully released. So in game here, if we talk to this NPC again at Kellendam just east of the Stable Master, southeast, he's the Hardened Traveler, and you can talk to him and see all these difficulties. There's a baseline normal difficulty there, then you have tier 1, 2, all the way up to 9, and the first 3 are named, and then you just have deadly pluses for the higher difficulties. But starting with the first one, we have hard, and this basically tells us everything we need to know. I will go ahead and increase the text size so we can all read this. And what it says, the main part I want to focus on is completing the quest will make the game significantly more difficult. That's basically expect that. But also completing the quest before level 11 will begin deeds that can be completed by achieving levels 50 and 100 without deactivating it, so you can get some titles from that. Just to show, this is the difficulty 3 deadly, and it says the exact same thing, so there's nothing new for checking out the different difficulty options. Even if we go all the way to deadly plus 6 or tier 9, they all say the same thing here. But that is all I have to show for the in-game highlight. And with the actual mechanics of this, obviously as you turn the difficulty up, enemies will get harder and harder. But the function of this is more so that you do less damage and your character gets weaker in a way, and the enemies themselves will do more damage to you. And with the deadly settings, you can actually sometimes get the Eye of Sauron debuff, which from what I have seen just has negative area effects around you, sometimes spawn and it will be like fire or something like that that can kill you. And also with this, enemies can actually randomly get buffs which make them much stronger. They function as corruptions, I believe, in the game. But this does mean that in addition to regular difficulty increase, there is some randomness element to it with those effects. And I should point out some of the higher difficulty settings are actually going to be really hard or even near impossible, it seems, to do solo, which means we may actually have some situations where you need not only a fellowship, but a good fellowship to go through the highest settings, which I am personally very excited for. To cover the rewards, there honestly aren't all that much right now in the beta. There are some unique titles for doing the baseline tier 1 hard difficulty and tier 3 deadly difficulty, and I think for each of those you can get up to plus 20% XP gain on tier 3 plus, and I believe that would be 10% for tier 1 and 15% tier 2, then again 20% for tier 3. But yeah, that is basically all there is to it in the beta. We'll talk more about that later, but the last bit of information I want to share is actually from Critter's Journey, who wrote this on LOTRO players and shared it on Twitter. I believe they're also known as Squirrelay, but what they did is they compiled a graph of the difficulty settings going on difficulty by tier. And as I show this on the screen, first what you are going to be seeing is the damage taken by a dummy, so the damage dealt to your character, and as you go up in the difficulty, obviously your character is taking more damage, so they're more susceptible. Enemies are more dangerous, which is expected, and it keeps going up as you increase the tier. But moving on, the graph on the right shows the upshot damage compared to difficulty, so your character, the way you think of this is your damage drops down as you go up in difficulty, and it actually drops to the same level between tiers 7 through 9. So while enemies start doing more damage as you go above tier 7, you will actually do the same damage based on this test again from Critter's Journey. And I do want to say I appreciate them sharing this information and having it in a nice graph format for me to view and share in the video. But anyway, that is actually it for the information on how it works, and again, this is all in the Update 30 beta, so there may be some changes before it is released. And I am personally hoping that it is near ready, so it does come pretty soon to LOTRO. Again, unsure if it will actually be in Update 30 with the new Legendary server, if it will maybe be a little bit after Update 30, which might be more expectable. But I am overall just very excited for this feature when it finally comes to LOTRO. But having said that, there are a few concerns I do have, and before I actually get into the concerns, I will say I just like this option right away. As soon as I saw this was something coming to LOTRO, I was very excited because I enjoy challenging solo and landscape content in the game. And as people who follow my channel regularly know, I do love just soloing and adventuring a lot in LOTRO, but sometimes I will say it can honestly feel a bit stale, like with a lack of challenge and lack of danger. And even thinking in terms of group content, like group content on the landscape, that is actually usually very trivial where you can just solo it and it doesn't require a group. And I do also like open world group content with places such as Dol Dinin, which is super easy now. Limelight Gorge, which is, I'd actually call that medium difficulty. And Tarling's Crown is actually pretty fun to try to solo because it's relatively hard. That would be a very interesting one to see on a very high difficulty setting with this feature. But anyway, that is too much off topic, and the point is having a feature that lets me choose to make landscape more challenging, it just sounds really awesome to me. And even having the option to make it harder for a fellowship again, that sounds super fun as well. And I honestly don't really have many other words for what I think of this feature. So with the concerns I have, don't get me wrong that I think this is a bad feature, but I think there's just more to talk about it here with these concerns, because all I can really say is it sounds super exciting overall. But to get into this, the biggest thing I think that this feature needs is it has to be rewarding somehow. My thoughts on this is, for me to spend all the extra time to go through some more challenging content, I would want something to show for it, and for me, preferably something actually useful for my character. Now, before I get into this, I do want to point out there are a lot of ways for people to actually exploit a feature like this, which is also a big concern. And this is by no means going to be a comprehensive list, but for example, you could just craft a level up. You could have somebody power level you. You could even use a Valor to level and get whatever you get out of this. And then you could even maybe get like a 12-man or 24-man raid farm group. If there are some rewards based on farming, you could get this huge group and just plow through things. So from that opposite perspective, there is of course some concern from both Standing Stone Games and LOTRO players on that, with the integrity of it and all sorts of things like that. But even with that, I really do just hope that they will make going through the content with the difficulty turned up rewarding somehow. And this is actually kind of like the exact same situation with missions. When I reviewed missions in the beta and when the system even came out, I reviewed it twice with that. Both times a big feature of the reviews was that missions were not rewarding enough and I had no motivation to run them. Well, over time, Standing Stone Games eventually made missions rewarding, and now I love that system, so yay with that. But I fear the same thing will happen with this feature, and that it won't be rewarding ultimately. But once again, I do have another caveat to that thought, and I actually wonder, does it even need to be rewarding? So from this opposite perspective as well, I actually have to draw back to one of the only games I played where you could choose difficulty like this, and that is going to be Halo, a long time ago, but it's a completely unrelated game, of course, to LOTRO, but going through the campaign on higher difficulties got you essentially nothing but bragging rights, and perhaps more importantly, actually a sense of accomplishment. So the question I have to ask myself is, will that be enough? Will I actually get enough enjoyment and sense of accomplishment going through difficult landscape where I don't feel the need to be rewarded? And with that, I honestly don't know, but it's still questions I am asking myself because it is something I will just have to see exactly how it plays out. And at this point, I should also talk about the rewards we do have. So first off, there are some titles. Again, for some players that can be a neat thing, and I might even like some of the titles, but I think they're kind of minor overall, and again, you could exploit your way to those like fairly easily unless something is actually done to prevent these they aren't really exploits, but just using methods we have in the game to level and not really have to do anything difficult, even if you turn that setting on. That is what I mean by kind of exploitative you. Again, it's using systems in the game. But getting back on topic, the other thing outside of titles we do have is plus 20% XP, and this one is kind of scary with a feature like this, to be honest, because I personally would actually want to somehow level slower, if anything. And as I discussed perhaps too much on my channel, sometimes level and XP honestly feel too meaningless in LOTRO, where I actually very rarely care about gaining XP or leveling fast actually on my characters. That is a whole other issue to talk about for another time though, but what I want to do is go back to missions, and with missions I think like a more character building oriented reward would be perfect for a system like this, and one that comes up time and time again because it just goes with your character is virtue XP and virtues. So I don't want to spend too long on my ideas for different rewards we could have, but what about something like 10 virtue XP per quest that is completed while the difficulty is on, or perhaps a deed where you have to kill 1,000 enemies with, again, the difficulty on higher, and that rewards, say, 1,000 virtue XP. Something like that would help make me feel like my time going through the content more slowly is actually still rewarded as much as if I were going through on the easiest setting at normal speed. Ultimately, what happens is going to be up to the LOTRO team, but yeah, because it sounds like it's such a fun feature, I do want to feel like I get enough out of it so that I don't feel like, say, not participating in higher difficulties, even thinking actually about the Update 30 Blood of Azog content in the new zone. Once again, I do hope that it would somehow be worth me turning up the difficulty at level 130 where I'm not getting like that extra XP gain and have no chance of getting the titles because my character is already level 130. But some reason for me to turn the difficulty up and go through the new zone at a more challenging pace compared to just normal speed. But anyway, after all this, I am really just curious what you all think about this whole rewards thing, and if you think we actually do need more character impacting rewards from a system like this compared to maybe just titles and again that sense of accomplishment that I talked about earlier. And just to point out once again, right now you actually get nothing if you do this at the level cap, which is perhaps where some of my bigger concerns are, even though I still feel the same about low levels ultimately with the XP gain and all that. But anyway, I do want to talk a little bit about the level 10 mark that I've brought up a few times in this video. I actually find that a bit of an odd level for this feature to start at. So you can actually start this, I assume, anytime you get out of the intro, but for the titles and character progression, if you don't change the difficulty, again, you can get the title, and that feature starts at level 10 or below. So I kind of get the idea of out of the intro, you turn this on for your character, but in my opinion, I feel like level 20 or before, like doing this at 20 or before, sounds better because I find that is when the world really opens up to more possibilities, and some things just go through so fast at those very low levels that seems a little bit odd. And if you are even like actually leveling through your starter zone, you may forget to change the difficulty up before level 11. You may have to restart the character if you wanted one of those titles. Even something like crafting, you could just easily forget that I feel like going right out the intro, but to me it just seems like level 20 would be better, but that is basically my point, and because I can't really explain it in a better way, I feel like we'll go ahead and set that aside because I do want to talk about the actual difficulties a little bit more here. And with this, I am going to be honest that while I love the challenge, I am not a fan of the RNG mechanics with the Enrages and Eye of Sauron and the such. While some people might like that, and that is great if they do, I just don't really know for myself. I don't like the randomness on top of mobs too much, or at least the idea of this randomness. The way I picture this is it is more annoying when it pops up compared to it being a thing where I'm like, oh, the mob is now extra tough and I'm about to have fire rain on me, and that's like a very exciting thing to try to avoid that or whatever and deal with that extra tough mob. But again, to me that just sounds more annoying than actually exciting. And I will say, I will hold out on this and just try to play through it and see what I ultimately think of that, but right now I am not too big on the RNG mechanics there. Next up, I have heard that finesse is also nerfed when you have the difficulty turned up, and I am also not really a big fan of this. I don't think my character should have their prowess lessened from this, and by that I really mean the difficulty up. I think enemies should feel stronger rather than me weaker, and having finesse nerfed so that I am missing a lot more just doesn't sound fun to me. At least I personally would rather do like 20% less damage than miss 20% of the time, so that one is just a little bit of an off feeling to me. But with this comment, one thing I do want to point out is that bugs, tweaks, fixes, and things like this, all that regular beta stuff are to be expected. So with that, I don't actually want to spend too much time talking about the specifics with balance and the such, but I did think finesse was a good one to pick on briefly because it's more of a, at least to me, it's more of a feel bad thing if I'm missing all the time compared to just doing a flat lower amount of damage. So what I actually will say somewhat related to balance is this will probably bring to light the balance of classes, especially while leveling again, and I should probably say imbalance rather than balance because a lot of classes actually have some weird scaling with level where they either get stronger with level or weaker with level in some cases, and a feature like this, especially on a legendary server again, will probably shine the light on all of this again as sort of a community interest and focus for the developers and things like that as well. So I think this could be good, meaning we actually get better balance and smoother progression experience on some classes, or it could actually be bad because balance changes focusing on low-level solo gameplay could actually negatively affect classes at higher levels or even endgame. And I know right now I am actually getting flashbacks to when we had the current legendary servers launched to Nor and Ithil, and some classes like Minstrel were quite strong at low levels, but then they were nerfed, so now they're actually even weaker at high levels, and going through solo gameplay at high levels is a little bit worse on them compared to what it used to be, even though Minstrel overall is not all that bad right now. It is something I did want to point out, and that really is just another thought I had on this whole landscape difficulty system. And with that, I feel like I've covered just about everything I have on that on my mind. And to briefly summarize my thoughts, I am very excited for this feature, and with that, I do have some concerns going along with that as well, and hopefully some of these concerns that I have will be worked on a bit before release. But again, I really am interested to hear y'all's concerns as well if you share any of mine on this or think differently than I do. I'd be very interested again in reading those comments. But to get back on topic, the last topic I do have for this video is on the legendary server. And I'm going to be honest that I have a bit of mixed feelings about this. It seems like something I should be super excited about, but I just don't know at this point. And I think this largely has to do with my playtime already being split between two servers. And for one, I worry that I'll just end up focusing maybe too much on the news server, but potentially like not having any of my regular kin members to play with or anything like that. And another concern is, like with the current legendary servers, if they release a bunch of things at once, so say we get new updates on the legendary server, we even get this new legendary server at the same time as update 30, that would be a big concern to me because historically Standing Stone Games has often decided to release a lot of things at once instead of spreading things out, so that would be a big concern as well. And in general, going back to the legendary server specifics, I will say we have already had a fresh start legendary server recently with the current Anor and what will be the closing Ithil. So I am just not quite as excited to do something like that again, a fully fresh start, as I was with the last legendary servers, again the one I still play. But ultimately, what I think is I will just have to treat this new legendary server a little bit differently than I did at Nor, and kind of think of it as a fun playground where I can turn the difficulty up for a very challenging Eriador sandbox. So, with that thought in mind, I am actually quite excited for the server now. I have been able to successfully convince myself in this video, and that is where I will leave you all on that on the happy note. But as a quick summary, I don't know exactly when this feature will be coming out, but it does sound like it will be exclusive to a new legendary server for a period of time that we don't know quite yet. Now, whether this is at the same time as update 30 or not, we also don't know. And I didn't even mention the Brawler, but perhaps they could try to align the new server with the Brawler class. Don't know on that as well. There are a lot of possibilities, and overall I'm just hoping they actually split the timing up a little bit so I'm not left feeling forced to choose either the new server or the new update 30 content like we have had with things like that in the past with the current legendary servers. But either way, I am still very excited for all three of these things. Again, the legendary server, the update 30 Blood of Azog, and of course the main topic of this video, the difficulty feature. And with that, I am interested to hear y'all's thoughts on all of these topics that we have covered and how they are all related and such. And for this video, I hope you all enjoyed it and learned something useful, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching everyone.